Hello and welcome to the second season of the Live Interviews. I'm Jeff Leibow, co-founder and producer of the NF Hope Concerts, and your host for this season. The Live Interviews came out of the pandemic as we were transitioning to a virtual stage. We had the wonderful problem of having so many generous artists contributing their talents and their performances that we decided to try something new and create an interview series where we could get to know these artists a little bit better. Learn where they got their start in music, where they are right now, and even what their connection is to this cause. For the second season, we wanted to shift our gaze from the NF Hope concert stage to those behind the scenes. Speak to NF researchers and pharmaceutical companies who are researching NF and potentially creating new therapies, as well as those that are even looking at alternative treatments. We then wanted to speak to NF families. So we will have interviews with multi-generational NF families as well as panels of family members who will tell us a little bit about what the NF experience is really like. We have a lot of incredible people to speak to this season. So without further ado, this is the Live Interviews. In our last episode of the Live Interviews, I expressed how blessed we are at the NF Hope Concerts to have the support of our presenting sponsors. I even had a chance to sit down and speak with one of them, Dr. Uche Eleje from Springworks Therapeutics. This week, I'm going to continue these conversations by speaking with yet another of our very generous presenting sponsors. Alexion Pharmaceuticals is probably best known in the NF community for the 2020 release of the very first FDA-approved treatment for neurofibromatosis. Koselugo was a massive step forward, offering options to those living with a plexiform neurofibroma. But today, we're not going to discuss Koselugo. We're not going to talk about the work that went into creating it, nor are we even going to talk about Alexion's vision for what the future of potential treatments might look like. Today, we're going to focus on something that many of you may not be familiar with, and those that are may have a very narrow definition of it. Patient advocacy is changing the way that pharmaceutical companies and organizations like them are supporting the NF community. Now, as I mentioned, some may think that patient advocacy is going to Washington, D.C. and lobbying for federal funds. And while that is certainly part of the picture, it is nowhere near the entire thing. Today, I'm honored to have two members of the Alexion Pharmaceutical Patient Advocacy team. Martha Orzechowski, the Global Head of Patient Advocacy, and our friend Matt Hay, the Director of U.S. Patient Advocacy. They're going to tell us a little bit about what patient advocacy is and why it's so important as a tool to help the NF community. Well, I don't want to do any more of the talking. I'm going to let them in. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guests for episode 2, Martha Orzechowski and Matt Hay.
So I think one of the things as an advocate in a way for the NF community, to me, advocacy often means heading to D.C. and talking to Congress people and making sure that there's some bill that is being put into action, that we're getting the support via letters, dear colleague letters. Advocacy, when it comes to patient advocacy, is obviously a very different animal. So Matt, I'm going to point the first question at you and just give you a really simple one, which is, what is patient advocacy?
So thanks, Jeff. I appreciate being here. And that question is, the more I learn about advocacy, the harder it gets to answer that question, because I've had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. with you and see you in action and learn from you. And in my mind, for a long time, it was fundraising, and being diagnosed with NF, spending a lot of time fundraising and trying to create awareness. And I thought that was advocacy. And then I learned about all the great work that you were doing in DC. And I thought, okay, well, now that's advocacy. In the role that I have now, very fortunate to have now in working with Alexion and working across all of these different aspects of advocacy, I realize what a narrow snapshot that is. If you think when the time it takes to bring medicine to market, and then if we do get medicine to market, now what? There's a role for advocacy in every single step of that. And, I've been with Alexion for a couple of years now, and I still, every day, I'm learning a new step where I think, why aren't we including a patient voice? Why aren't we talking to a caregiver? Or why aren't we talking to somebody with NF about that and getting their perspective on that step in a phase 1 trial, phase 2 trial, phase 3 trial? And so I guess, defining advocacy by just finding opportunities for patients and caregivers to be a part of every step of their journey and have a voice in every step of their journey, not just lobbying, not just funding and research. There's a lot of opportunities out there.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. Well, Martha, first, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have you. Matt speaks very highly of you. And coming from Matt, you should know, I think that's an enormous compliment. So now that we kind of have an idea of what patient advocacy is in a much broader sense than me and many other, at least NF advocates, sort of knew it, why is improving patient advocacy so important to you at Alexion?
Thanks for the question, Jeff, and the compliment, Matt. I'm really happy to be here, and glad that you gave me a super difficult question for my first question.
That's what we like to do here
on this recording. Why is it important? Well, Matt talked a little bit about the sort of how you do it, which is aspiring to, at every step of the medicine's life cycle and every step and phase within the healthcare ecosystem involving the patient or caregiver voice, the how around it. But the why is really because at the heart of what we do, we want to make sure that we are innovating for patients in places and spaces that matter to them, and then finding a way to deliver that innovation in a way that leaves no patient behind. So the importance of patient advocacy is taking all of the experience, insight, engagement that's happening across the medicine's life cycle and using it to design and deliver the best possible medicines that we can, so that when we say we want to transform patient outcomes, we're really accelerating our trajectory and opportunity to do so.
So I'm going to expand this question. You know, I can think of a lot of jobs to have out there in pharmaceuticals. Why is improving the patient experience very personally important to you? What drew you to this?
That is another corker of a question. So thank you for that. You know, it's funny because when you think about patient advocacy or patient centricity, one of the things that I always like to remind people is what it really kind of rewinds back to, or what's really fundamentally at the center of that is just people centricity or human centricity. And so I think for myself, this notion that together we are all part of the same community, together we are all here for each other and to do the best we can for each other. For me, I think it's that sort of anchor that really drives me. I also had a mom who was in healthcare from, you know, as long as I can remember, worked in open heart surgery, was an ICU nurse, clinical informatics, kind of did everything. And so I was also kind of raised around a lot of discussion about the healthcare system and the patient experience. And so I think that sort of people centricity, also from a Greek and Italian family. So sort of everywhere around me are these very people-centric themes and terms and way of engaging both personally and professionally. I think it was only a matter of time before, you know, the apple kind of did not fall far from the oak tree in this particular case. And not long before, I think I realized that for me to be personally fulfilled, I had to find a career or a profession that sort of had that people centricity notion at the center of the role. So I consider myself extraordinarily fortunate, and I truly believe that these are hands down the best jobs in pharma. It's a responsibility and a privilege to do the work that we do. So I'm here because people and patients are at the center of everything I do at home and at work.
That's great. Well, now I can start to appreciate why Matt thinks so highly of you. All right, Matt, your turn. I think a lot of people may know your story, but you know, let's assume that we're going to get some people listening that might not. So, what is it that inspires you to help rare disease patients and their families?
Boy, I've answered this question a lot, and it's still emotional every single time. When I was diagnosed, I had never heard of NF. I didn't know how to spell it. I didn't know how to say it. And I didn't know where to go with that information. I feel like in about 30 seconds, the doctor told me everything he knew about NF. I went home and Google didn't exist. I went to Netscape Navigator and they got one hit, and it was a scanned PDF copy. And from the 80s, and it had a life expectancy on there that was not very encouraging for a kid that a week earlier felt pretty invincible before he saw his MRI scan on that wall in Indianapolis. And I was very lucky. I am very lucky. I was surrounded by friends and family, and I was in college and had everything anybody could ever want. And despite that, I had never felt more alone in my life. I didn't even, it wasn't like, okay, I know what I need to do. I just need to get motivated to do it. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't have anybody to tell me what to do. And so I reached out to a patient advocacy group that I found on Netscape Navigator, which is by maybe not so coincidental, but it ended up being NF Network, and in talking with them and realizing that these patient advocacy groups exist to be if they don't have all of the answers for people that are in a situation like me, because we were all figuring it out together, right? But to have a community of people to say, we all get it, we're all scared of the same things, and we all want the same things, and we're going to work toward the same things. We don't know how we're going to get there, but we're all united in that effort. And so, Martha mentions being incredibly fortunate. My 20-year journey was a decade of just hoping I woke up the next day, and specifically diagnosed with NF2, and in a little bit of denial about what that would mean. And then in my 20s, pretty much everything they said would happen or could happen did happen. And so I spent my 20s just trying to make it through each day, and then in my 30s realizing if I don't make an effort to get back and to be someone that can now answer the questions that someone else who's somewhere sitting in an apartment in Chicago just as lost as I was, how I wasn't okay just sitting on a couch and doing something that wasn't help answering that question. And that was the path that led me to advocacy. It took me a long time to get here. And now that I'm here, I don't know how I could ever do anything else.
That's amazing. Again, speaks volumes about who you are. Fortunately for me, I already knew that. All right, so kind of jumping back to where Alexion is, Martha, I'll put this question on your plate. What is Alexion doing to help improve the patient experience?
So Alexion takes our commitment to rare disease patients and their families extraordinarily seriously. And I think even the way that our company is set up is intended to impress upon our own employees and all of the external stakeholders that we work with how important this work is to us by dedicating a standalone function within the organization to the patient experience. So Matt and I are lucky enough to be part of a larger team called the Patient Experience Team at Alexion. What is, I think, very much differentiated about that function is truly inside one function at Alexion. We have individuals looking after how we take the power of the patient and caregiver experience and fuel our work. So we have a team within the patient experience team that specifically is looking at patient insights and solutions for the organization, developing offerings that help equip our internal employees with the depth of understanding around a disease and a patient experience and a caregiver experience that they can then share more broadly, and they can fill their own sort of arsenal of information that will help them be smarter and more patient-centric about how they apply those learnings to the way that they work and their role within the company. We have a dedicated patient advocacy team. Matt and I are part of the US and Canada patient advocacy team. We also have a team dedicated to what's happening outside of North America. So colleagues around the world working to engage with local patients and patient groups in places like China, in places like France, in places like Argentina, in addition to the work that we are doing here. So we can make sure that how Alexion shows up and how Alexion engages is consistent no matter where you find us or our medicines. And then there is a team within the patient experience team that we call the Patient Engagement Center of Excellence. This team is here to make sure that what we do when we engage with patients and patient groups happens on a foundation of sound governance, ethics, and business principles. So how are we making sure when we contract with a patient or when dollars go out the door to a patient advocacy organization, that we are truly putting the patient at the center of that engagement, and that the mechanisms that support our ability to do so stand up to the strictest of standards and the highest of standards, which is an incredible gift to have a team like that within our organization. And then we have a team which is fairly new but really exciting, that's being put in place to make sure that inclusion and diversity is happening in our clinical trials. And then again, as we follow our medicine through the life cycle, that we don't just have clinical trials that reflect the real world population of patients and the diseases that we're studying, but that everything we do after that makes sure that the patients who participated in those trials, their community members will also have the opportunity to access that same innovation a year later or 2 years later when hopefully we are submitting medications for review and approval by the FDA. So I think what Alexion is doing and some of the how that we've talked about is so important. But I think even in terms of signaling both within the organization and to the outside world that this is important, the fact that they're putting human and financial resource behind it shows that there is true long-term dedication and commitment to making sure that this is in the fabric of what we do, not just today, but in the years to come.
Amazing.
So, Jeff, when you listen to that, go back to your first question of what is advocacy. You could imagine when Martha explained that to me when we met, and I was like, well, wait a minute. I thought we were going to Capitol Hill. There's a lot of steps. And I admittedly, when I took the job, I thought I'm going to come in and show them, what it's really like, that I had this perspective that had never occurred to anybody there. And I was pretty floored of just how many different stakeholders there, how many people we had internally focusing on very specific things, and the talent of those people. They could be, to make this about NF for a second, I think every day these people could be doing anything. Our medical team, our commercial team, they're talented folks, and they could choose to apply their expertise in a lot of different ways. And how lucky am I? And how lucky are you that they chose to apply that to NF? And that's just another reason why I felt lucky to have this job. But yeah, Martha touched on all of the different things that we're doing, and to go back to the patient centricity and patient focus, we're not making medicine to stock shelves. The goal isn't to fill a pharmacy. The goal is to get something that's going to help somebody live a better life. And I'm still pleasantly surprised by how many times even when I come to Martha with an idea, her first question is, why? Like, yes, that one thing is cool and interesting, but to what end? Because we need to make sure we're not doing something just for a good picture, or a T-shirt. How is this going to ultimately make somebody's lives better? How is this going to get us treatment faster or better? And it's made me. She and I were just talking earlier this week how much different I view advocacy now than even just a year ago, because you start to see all of the different things that we do and all of the different things we still need to do.
Right. That's well, as an NF dad, obviously I am very excited by the work that you guys are doing, not only to advance potential treatments for neurofibromatosis individuals, but also to support the families and the patients that are working through what a bizarre diagnosis this can be. And I imagine that's similar to any rare disease. So Matt, I'm going to aim this next question at you, and that is because we have that time when it comes to neurofibromatosis, and I think we probably have a similar dream of what could be. So if you could create the ideal future for patient advocacy, what does it look like?
So I'm going to start with an answer by something that you didn't ask, but as you were just saying that, it made me think. I think it's something important to acknowledge. I don't think Alexion would be where they are in NF if it wasn't for the work that that you and other advocacy groups have been doing for the last 20, 30, 40 years. In 1997, we were all pushing this rock up a hill, and we had no idea how heavy that rock was going to be. We had no idea how long that hill was going to be. We were all out talking about this and creating awareness and fundraising in various ways to support research. And I'm not sure we even knew what that meant. It had never been done before. And that persistence of feeling like this work is going to lead to something, it did, and it does. And I don't think we would be where we are now without that. I don't know that we would exist if it wasn't for the groundwork. And now, because of that work, the patient community, I trusted those advocacy groups. When I have a question, I wouldn't know Martha individually. I wouldn't call her and say, what do I need to do? I would call a patient advocacy group specializing in NF and say, how can I get involved? What can I do? And then maybe at that point, you can say, well, we have this great program with Alexion that we think we might be able to work together on. So nothing that we do would exist or continue to exist without that partnership. So I just want to make that clear to anybody listening, that everything that you do and have done, we're all part of the same network here. In terms of what that looks like, I mean, we all want to live in a world where there's no disease. It sounds like a John Lennon song, but the reality is that that's probably going to continue to exist in some way, whether that's NF or not. So being pragmatic about that, what systems can we put into place so that if you or your family or your brother or sister are dealing with that, you feel like you're getting answers and care that you need in the right place, in the right time, in the right way. So I think about things very visually. And if you've ever been to the Smithsonian or somewhere and you see the space shuttle and they have those clear windows where you can peek in and see like, oh, okay, now I understand what this looks like or how that works. I would like a world where advocacy exists in a way where we have those clear windows across the entire system where you can say, hey, I've just been diagnosed. I don't know what to do. Well, I'm going to peek in that window and know that here are 5 different groups that can support me. And then, hey, now I've been asked to be a part of a clinical trial, but I'm not really sure what that means. Where do I gather more information? Or why wouldn't I let somebody else do a trial? And then if it works for them, then I ask more questions. Well, let's look into that clear window and understand how that works. But that probably would end up being a circular room, because by the time you go through that whole process, you will have learned so much. I hope you now want to say, I want to teach somebody why that clinical trial is so important, or I want to teach somebody why being asked to be on an advisory board and why your voice is so important. I want advocacy to exist where we are, where people need them at the time that they need them. And I think we're working on that, but I don't know. I kind of hope there's no end to that, because we should never get comfortable and say, hey, we did it. There's always more work to be done.
Right. I mean, I think that is, I I think that's the heart of even my vision of what advocacy was, even though it was probably a little bit more narrow than you've now taught me that it is in truth. But it, there is an experience, especially a patient experience. There's the unknown. There's the fear. There's getting answers. There's figuring out what life truly is like versus what a picture on the internet may make you think it's going to be, and you get to what is the end of the beginning of your journey. And if you're like me and like you, and I imagine Martha like you, your goal is to say, I don't want somebody to feel as lost as I did. How can I go back to the beginning and grab their hand and, like you said, show them each window one at a time and tell them exactly what to expect and how to help. I made a phone call to NF Network when this all started. That person that helped me was Kim Bischoff, the executive director. And I would like to believe that I've done that with a number of NF families, and Matt, I've got to imagine that you have as well. And Martha, I'm sure you didn't get to where you are without holding a lot of hands. And I personally kind of think even I, with a general understanding of that, have a better idea of what patient advocacy looks like now. So maybe a good place for this to go next is what happens next. There's the dream of what the potential for patient advocacy can be. And then there's what's going into action. So, what are the steps to get us there, and where are we?
So I think that's probably a good question for Martha, but before she jumps in on that, I want to add, and this isn't pandering because we're already here. Something Jeff taught me is I was as an advocate. Jeff, you made me a better advocate, I have had enough time to think about what I mean when I say that. And I was trying to figure out where my place was. I was a marketing major. Do I help write a mission statement? Do I have a network of friends? Am I just a fundraiser? And I didn't know. And seeing you, and it was specifically on a Hill Day visit, and seeing you recognize, you never wanted to be here either. You're here because you're fighting for your daughter. What skills and talents do you have? What are the things that professionally and personally you've developed? And it's being able to host things like this, or anybody that's seen you host an event live knows that's your wheelhouse. That to take the performer talent and skill that you have and say, I'm going to find a way to use that to advocate for my daughter. And that was huge for me, because it helped me to kind of look back and say, what unique skills do I have that I can apply? Because everybody, there's never been an NF event where I haven't looked around and been able to say, they are excellent at this, they are excellent at this, they are excellent at this. So if anybody's wondering, how do I get involved, or what could I possibly do? I would encourage you to really be thoughtful about what skills do you have, and then find a way to apply those to advocacy. And I think, so thank you for teaching me for that. And then I'm just sort of anecdotal evidence of that was a really helpful thing for me to identify what path did I want to take. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Martha about where we go next.
Well, I think what you've both said just now is really important. I think one of the places we need to go next is to continue to encourage people with a passion for this work, whether it be because of a personal experience or because there's an opportunity for them professionally to get involved. We need to encourage people with enthusiasm for this work to continue to do it. We need more people bringing their voices to the table from both the patient side and from the rest of the stakeholders in the ecosystem, whether it is our regulatory agencies like the FDA, whether it is pharmaceutical manufacturers, whether it's insurers. We need to continue to encourage people to come together for these critical conversations around how the patient experience has to drive a different way of working moving forward. So we have to keep pushing and inspiring and holding people accountable for showing up to have these very conversations about why this is such critical work if we're serious about innovating and delivering medicines that can solve some of the challenges that our families are facing around the world. So I think that is a huge part of it. I think the other part of it is we need to continue to push each other to elevate these success stories, whether they are in research or they are in access or they are in management or they are in the value of peer-to-peer support. We need to continue to highlight those stories. We need to continue to push and find places to make that work really visible so that people start to understand it in more of a mainstream way. I think that's the only way to sort of get things moving both quickly enough, but also sort of authentically enough to actually make some real change. And I think part of that is the sort of old tried and true of we live in this very metrics-based world. So how do we talk about the meaning of this work? How do we take a story about Jeff as a dad or Matt as a person living with and couple that with compelling data, information, facts to drive behavior change? I think it's like the sort of, I've been in advocacy for 20 years. It's the sort of age-old question. But I think the only way we're going to answer it is together, with an acknowledgement that there's always going to be a subjective people story part of this, coupled with the data we need to drive meaningful change. So I think, getting the voices to the table, lifting those voices up, getting the stories out there, making them visible. You can't deny the power of when that happens or when you've seen that happen, like the magic and transformation that actually follows it. So how can we do more of that?
So see, Jeff, you these are the pep talks I get every day when I find myself doing something that is maybe kind of soft and nice, but to what end? And that was not something I didn't even know I needed. I thought that I needed that reminder, and I think that it's a good. And I'm bringing that up now because I think the NF community should be happy to hear that these things aren't happening on an island. The goal is to bring more and better treatments faster, and we're not here to have a cute show or to entertain. That's not the goal. That might be a reason to bring people together, but that's not the goal that we're all working toward. And so it was really great. It's been a really great learning experience for me to see how many different people are working on behalf of the NF community with that unified vision of how do we keep pushing forward? How do we keep pushing forward? I don't think I expected that when I got here, and so it's been a pretty great surprise.
Well, I think there's another bonus here, and that is I think patients are always looking for resources. They're looking for help and making sure they feel like they're not on an island, because it so often can be with rare disease. I think they got a little glimpse into the people who are behind it, and I don't know about you, but that makes me far more comfortable than I was 36 minutes ago. And that is meant to be a compliment to both of you. And I can only imagine that you have fostered an environment where your entire team are just replicas of that, at least the passion behind it. That's what's going to make change. You're right. That's what's going to drive us to help more families, and maybe even create a pipeline where we know exactly how we can help them from the pharma side, so that when they go to the doctor, there are more options for them than there used to be, and there's somebody to hold their hand as they move towards them. Well, I can't thank both of you enough for taking a moment out of your day. I'm really excited that people got a chance to hear your voice and learn more about advocacy. I know I did, for certain. And maybe Matt, I will show up on the Hill this next February, and I will take with me some of what I've learned in the last half hour. Anyway, thank you both. I really appreciate it. I look forward to the next time we get a chance to speak, although maybe not on video chat. And and thank you for everything you do.
I was going to say thank you, Jeff, for the work you do. We're all in this together.
Wonderful. All right. Well, have a great day. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. This was the Live Interviews.